Don't Starve Together is the titular sequel to a popular indie game surrounding survival in an uncompromising world of monsters and magic. The game is meant to be played with friends to fight the new bosses who are much stronger than their single-player counterparts, though a great many people go up against these bosses solo anyways as a display of skill. However, what if you went up against these bosses as a boss mob yourself, going toe-to-toe with other monsters of the constant, effectively making the fight an even battle? Can you beat Don't Starve Together as a Varg? But first, thank you to my $1 patrons who actually get to see this video early. It's thanks to support like yours that I am able to continue putting work into these videos and in turn create more content supporting this channel in the long run as YouTube slowly moves further and further down the path of destruction. If you want to see my videos early like them, consider joining for just $1 a month. Link in the description. Okay, grift over, now back to the video. So to start out with, since the Varg is not a playable character, or a character to begin with, we will need a mod in order to permanently lock our conscience inside the body of what is essentially a pit bull driving a mech. Secondly, when I say beat Don't Starve Together, there technically is no ending screen to Don't Starve Together, therefore the game's end is subjective. However, when I define ending to DST, I mean killing one of the two endgame bosses, Fuelweaver or Celestial Champion. The only rules of this challenge being, I have to play the entire game as legitimately as a Varg or as legitimately as you can play as a Decimation Doggo tank, and I am not allowed to receive assistance from other players. Everything else is fair game. So I picked the new thickest character on the roster, and the game was afoot. And after breathing through my obnoxiously long snout for only a few seconds, I immediately realized that this challenge would have its own level of abysmal nature to it. And that, of course, was my obnoxiously slow picking speed. Not only is it slower than the carrat's picking speed, but it applies to almost everything I do, including picking up non-harvestable items and mining resources. As for attacking, it's even worse. I may do a flat 100 damage per attack, but there is also a cooldown on my bite to where I have to wait a solid 3 to 4 seconds to attack again, making my damage output completely abysmal compared to regular characters, and even the carrat. I found the ice staff set piece and willingly woke the hounds. Then I remembered something. As a Varg, I am technically the faction leader of the hounds, meaning these ice hounds actually work for me, and they followed me around as companions until they got into a turf war with some spiders. I then found a sinkhole, I vented, and inside the underground I both collected the remaining gold I would need to alchemy engine rush and began my search for the moon ruins, or the lunar ruins. Not the ancient ruins, the one with the centipedes.
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
I then built a science machine and prototyped the 3 signature items I always do: a spear, backpack, and alchemy engine. However, I unfortunately realized later on that crafting a melee weapon for the Varg is useless, as it does not shorten its attack time and only changes its attack damage, effectively making every melee weapon in the game a poor choice to use for the Varg. However, I did end up finding the ruins I was looking for, and made my way inside to learn how many gems I would need to make. Also, you may have noticed by now that this Varg can not only see perfectly in the dark, but is completely unaffected by sanity/insanity fields. Is this significantly powerful? Yes, of course it is. And I haven't even displayed all of this creature's abilities yet, because as of writing this, we are at most 5% of the way done with the journey. I found the spots and learned I would need only one more gem and decided to hit the other ruins before I left Undertale. The ruins weren't hard to locate, and as I began pillaging, I relished in the fact that, despite having a very low damage rate, then I am still more than capable of defending myself, as with 1,800 health, I am able to fight off most all of the clockworks and shadows with relative ease, despite my movement speed being like a dog in perpetual slow motion. After rebuilding the ancient science station, I debated on leaving my gems on the surface while I go up to collect the living logs that I 100% could have collected before coming down here, but decided against it. My doggo bros were waiting for me at the surface to help me kill the bats that spawn, and I began sleeping to gain my health back. This is another one of the Varg's abilities that allows it to sleep in order to regain its health from basically anywhere, so long as you have enough hunger to do so. In other words, for this operation, I can skip all other healing foods and simply focus on just collecting meat to heal myself, as nothing would effectively heal over 1,800 HP anyways. Making my way all the way back down after collecting enough logs to live off of, I constructed the 2 staffs that I would need: a Star Color staff and a Deconstruction staff. I also made a Thulecite crown because why not? Though I would conserve its use for now, as I knew I had far worse battles ahead of me for this challenge. Speaking of far worse battles, in case it isn't obvious by now of the 2 bosses that I plan to kill, I'm going after Celestial Champion, both because the last challenge as a carrat I fought Fuelweaver, and as Varg it's actually in my best interest to do so.
Absolutely good!
Okay, see these 3 here, ready?
Well, granted they've got...
so I got to work immediately with the moon rock idol, building walls around it and collecting the moon rock for future use. There was a desert nearby, so there was no problem collecting the stone needed to make the walls. I also learned in this time that you could summon hound companions to your location by howling with the H key. They are good enough to have in a fight, and they also drop monster meat of their own on death, which I can consume safely with me being a monster myself. Unfortunately, they attacked my walls when the lunar staff event began, and I had to put them down along with the rest of the idol's attacker. The whole thing didn't really matter though regardless, because as long as you have at least 3 layers of wall, I'm fairly certain it is physically impossible for the attackers to break through it in time to stop the lunar staff. Following the moon event, I collected my prized moon collar staff now, and immediately deconstructed it for the iridescent gem inside.
I hope you like squash!
Making my way back down to Undertale, I immediately slotted the final gem into the slot, activating the underground moon runes. We then go to the clear knowledge dispenser and collect some concentrated testosterone. One memory game later, I collected the astral detector blueprint from the ancient testosterone hieroglyphics and crafted 2 of them, as I was certain I would need at least 2 of them to find everything. I also collected the foreskin from a touchstone on my way out, and I immediately got an insurance quote from the detector, pointing me in the right direction. I also found Chester, and deposited my drill dough onto the payload. Fortunately, as a muscle doggo, I am more than capable of carrying the astral piece with no hindrance to my movement speed. So I laid it next to a beach and would use the astral detector itself to find the island as soon as I found the second piece. We get one more insurance quote for now. I collect some meat for the trip. I kill one of the worst fucking creatures in existence.
Out of my way!
I collected even more meat, and then I built some bug nets so I could kidnap some bees and butterflies before winter. Most of you likely know what I'm planning by now with collecting all these bees and other insects and putting them into landmines, but for those of you who don't know, I'll just say I'm making a sandwich.
I ate a big motherfucking sandwich made of eggs and bacon, wasps and bees and spiders and spider webs and rocks and...
So I set sail at the start of winter, and much like the magnificent carrat, I was completely immune to the cold. During my voyage, a shark started stalking me in a very seductive manner. I also found one of Pearl's jars out in the sea. The jar had one of those My Little Pony toys in it though, and it was kinda hard to open. Anyways, we made it to the island and I completed the basic errands of that place, placing down the 2 astral pieces that I already had, and assembling the 3 pieces already present on the island. On my way back to the island, I remembered that this guy exists, even though I've literally never done his questline. I also decided to build a tackle box because for some reason I thought it would help me catch the proper fish for a different questline. Spoiler alert, it did not. I also killed this tree guard that spawned in my trees because it's my forest, not his. As for that questline, I collected some not enough marble for her house and killed some of Gorlex's girlfriends. He doesn't mind, he has a ton of them. I also grabbed some fireflies and a few other things I left in Undertale. I made some carpets, got on my boat, and set sail for Pearl's house, just hoping I would encounter some terrorist fish on the way. Me was lucky, and by lucky, I of course mean I managed to get enough shells before they mobbed me and destroyed my boat. I eventually made it to Pearl's house, and when I got there, built the first tier of her house before realizing I didn't have enough marble. Did the first set of drying racks, because that is the easiest quest you can do for Pearl, and you can do it multiple times, purchased the penis wrench, planted flowers, and went back and got some marble. I also got attacked by the British Navy, but since I had a mod running, I had no idea what would happen if this Varg were to pick up a cursed monkey trinket, so I just decided to avoid them after they crashed into me. I finished the other 2 levels of the house building because we had already gathered the materials to do so, and I grabbed some berry bushes and made a deep sea fishing pole so I could catch an ice fish before winter was over, as it would knock a whole point off. And it wasn't the right size because of course it wasn't. After getting the berry bushes down, MILF Crab's shop changes to sell lures that will specifically attract only fatty fish, and they got to work collecting the thickest fish in the sea, killing the lure plant on Pearl's behalf, and giving her an umbrella during the rain. Finishing up the questline with some bloomfin season fish, and the shark that was hitting on me earlier tried to steal my fish, so I decided to put it on the Y-axis. Pearl finally coughed up Benson's gumballs, and I was off to make preparations to commit adultery with Pearl's husband. During that time, I got sidetracked in a turf war with a spider queen, and promptly won, after spending more time on it than I probably should have. Keep in mind, I needed literally nothing from her. She was simply challenging me, and I can't resist the call to war. I started my preparations by prototyping the grope wrench and collecting plenty of wood for boats for Crab King. Now, many of you may recall earlier that I said I was building a sandwich and that I was going to commit adultery with Crab King. Well, when I said sandwich, I actually meant bomb, and when I said commit adultery, I actually meant vehicular manslaughter. Fortunately, the general strat here is simple. I just zipped through the magic tab really quick because I already had all the resources for Shadow Manipulator, and made 9+ purple gems to make Crab King's only buffed attack the Fisher. Next, we strap all those bee mines to the front of our boat and run over Crab King with it. All we have to do to find him is get one more insurance quote from the Astro Detector, as we already have the other totems done. Arriving at Crab King's lair, I broke down all of the sea stacks so I would have about as much mobility as a giant pit bull driving a circular boat can hope to have.
Moving behind the rocks!
So we go through the plan one more time. Strap the bees to the side of the boat, slot in the pearl and gems of choice, and we immediately slam our boat against the side of Crab King to make sure all the bees spawn. Don't worry if it's spring, the bees still won't attack me, due to the simple fact that they are still aggroed to Crab King, and will stay aggroed until its death. Our role in this is simple, just rowing around in circles and avoiding the fishers and crab claws, while the bees do everything, and if I get caught, I still have several boats left to throw at it, so there is no issue. Then lightning struck my boat, which I didn't really plan for, but the swapping boat strategy works just as well for that. Though I also brought an ice staff with me for a separate reason, so I just used that. And a few minutes later, Crab King himself kicked the bucket, and I was off to set up the wrench to pick it up. Unfortunately, the bees were no longer aggroed to Crab King, which meant they were free to attack me. And attack me they did, almost killing me in the process.
Raider!
After collecting my prize from Mr. Krabs, I immediately made my way back to the Moon Island. It wasn't that far from Crab King, and I activated the Endless Moon. I was now officially in the home stretch. I tried to build a bridge halfway to the mainland, it didn't really work out, and when I made it back, I was greeted by the Moonstorm. And searching through the Moonstorm, I found him.
Wagstaff, don't starve.
He gives me the blueprint for the potato goggles, and I immediately whip up a farmstead, even though I exist solely on a diet of toddlers and narcolepsy. Fortunately, this Varg can also talk to crops, and I was then attacked by a bunch of hound traders. And after a few more complications, I had the resources needed to build 2 potato hats, as unlike the carrat, this Varg is not immune to storm effects, and I was on my way to get 3 contained statics that I would need to finish this. I brought some doggo bros with me in the storm, as by now you've likely realized that I, as a Varg, although more than competent to handle single enemies in a fight, I struggle greatly with anything in groups of 3 or larger, as proven with my own bees attacking me. So I started the event hoping that the hounds would hold off the bards for me, and they were the ones who destroyed the static container. I tried this several times with the hounds, and they turned on the static container every single time. Fortunately, I wasn't out of the fight yet. We were inside the deciduous biome after all, and since I had no plans to use it for anything else, I snatched the time freeze pan flute to stop all the birds in their tracks, while Wagstaff finished his first and second contained statics. Then my pan flute was almost out. Fortunately, I still had my deconstruction staff, so I just took it apart and put it back together with my shadow manipulator. And this combined with my other strat of using the bird's own projectiles to shoot their own side with, I had all 3 of the contained statics and the end was now in sight. All I had to do left was get the extremely fast spoiling items and ferry them down over to the Moon Island before they spoil. But I still had a few other preparations I wanted to make for the Celestial Champion. Well, my solution to this was to build another half-bridge, this time it being straight from the Moonstorm to the location of the moon. This allowed me to get there in a timely manner enough to build the first 2 layers of the experiment, and then began my preparations for the final battle. Of course, I also had to find the Celestial Orb, so I went looking for it in a meteor field, and it was right there. So my last pieces of preparation would be found in Undertale. Now, I've already mentioned, as a Varg, weapons are completely useless to me, as they just decrease my base damage. However, armor is anything but useless, and turns me into something even more tanky. So I made my way down to the ruins and spent all my resources on Thulecite crowns, and on top of that, I had been collecting pigskin this entire game for this very occasion. So I gathered the remaining crystals I needed, flied myself to the moon, summoned my minions, and I was ready to finish this. Beginning the fight, the Celestial Champion poofed down to Earth as gracefully as he possibly could. The first phase of the fight wasn't too hard, though it wasn't anything to shake your head at either. The hounds were actually helping out quite a bit during the first assaults, attacking alongside me and helping me chip off more damage before leaving behind the monster meat that my mid-combat naps would help regain my health. Anyways, I made it through the first fight with relatively few difficulties. Which is exactly what this second phase was not. Vicious blades slashing my poor pet doggies into millions of delicious chunks I ate later, every few attack patterns. Fortunately, using the hounds to redirect its spin attack was invaluable for me to win this fight. As a Varg, I am more than capable of taking the abuse of 2 to 3 blades spin attacks. However, given my attack speed, the second phase alone will take at least an entire day to get through. And the fact that I'm basically being a giant pit bull renders me too slow, meaning I have no ability to dodge its attacks other than being far away to begin with and using hounds to redirect the attacks. I actually died for the first time in the entirety of this challenge due to how much health is lost in a single attack spin. It got hard and tedious being shotgunned in the mouth and being attacked with a portable blender every 30 seconds, and then having to spend another minute sleeping off the wounds I obtained, but I eventually got him whittled down to death, and it was time for the worst and final variant. Celestial Champion, Phase 3 and all of its, well, I would say glory, but there's nothing glorious or honorable about this fucking silly magnifying glass. Yeah, if you thought Phase 2 was bad, this guy has lasers. Yeah, the individual lasers may not do as much as a single blade spin rush attack, but make no mistake, they were 100% worse. First off, this is the attack he uses the most out of all of them, meaning 7 to 8 laser attacks in a minute. Second of all, I'm a large target, meaning he often hits me with 2, and if I'm only a short range away, all 3 laser attacks in a single attack, and it repeats each of these attacks every time it makes one. And on top of that, it summons these annoying ass crystals everywhere that make you fall asleep if you get too close to them. I used all of my crowns, every single pig foreskin I had to make football hats, and when I was out of them, it wasn't even halfway dead. So now being without any armor on and forced to fall asleep for a solid minute every 3 attacks, I did the one thing I could do and started summoning hounds again. To say they were helpful by attacking Celestial Champion would be like saying Austria was helpful to Germany in World War I. In other words, they might as well have not even shown up. However, these hounds are also made out of meat that is free for the taking when they die. And another plus to these hounds is, being in moon-infected areas, hounds will often rise from the dead as horror hounds, which are loyal to the hound faction, but more importantly, they also drop meat. That is a solid 100% more hound per hound, meaning I can refuel myself from my naps quicker and continue slowly whittling down the oppression magnifying glass. And with the help of my more saving, more doing Hound Depot discount, I was finally able to defeat the Celestial Champion, rendering it to its vegetative state. Wagstaff then came and had a conversation with me while he put the Celestial Champion's soul inside of a Pokeball, and I beat Don't Starve Together as a Varg. This was actually a pretty fun challenge, as you essentially play as the faction leader of the Hounds, who is also this big walking tank, and it was essentially the polar opposite of my Can You Beat Don't Starve Together as a carrat video, who was small and weak, and also not super fast, but fast enough to effectively navigate the world. And ironically enough, the Varg's ability to summon hounds is actually what ended up saving me and this challenge towards the end. So, I'd actually recommend trying this challenge if you want a goofy way to beat the game. Thank you all for watching, thanks again to my Patreon supporters, and have a wonderful day.
Pull up in a riot,